The federal budget came out recently, setting the stage for the fall election. Many feel it'll provide a lot of distraction from the SNC-Lavalin affair. Joining me now from Ottawa is political journalist Brian Lilley. Now, Brian, many Canadians are actually excited about this budget since it'll include help for first-time home buyers, seniors, and Canadians who want to return to school for skills training.
Well, do you remember in the 2015 election, and well, basically every day since, Justin Trudeau and his cabinet have stood up and said that they're there for the middle class and those working hard to join it. Well, I was in the budget lockup, Hal. I was there for, it's got to be what, about my 18th budget. Investing in the middle class. That's the title of the budget. And it's all about a little bit of help for seniors, a little bit of help for first time home buyers, especially the millennials. It's a little bit, as you said, for skills training, but not a lot for anybody, which makes me wonder, why do we still have a $19.8 billion deficit for this year? Because they talk about a national pharmacare plan, but they don't provide any money. They talk about covering prescription drugs for rare diseases that are incredibly expensive. It can be $10,000 and up per year for some of these diseases. But that money doesn't kick in until 2022-23 fiscal year. So what are we spending all this money on that, despite the fact that government revenue has gone up, government spending keeps going up even faster? And this was the year that they were supposed to balance the budget. Instead, it's a $19.8 billion deficit. That's really tough. If you're a first-time home buyer, yeah, there's going to be some measures in there. And, I know your kids are in that range where you're probably hoping that they'll get out of the family home, buy a first home. There's lots of parents like that. But it's this weird thing where Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation is going to help you lower your monthly payments by taking an ownership stake in your house. It's absolutely bizarre.
That is strange, too, considering we had the stress test implemented not too long ago, right? Making it even harder for people to get mortgages. Brian, the Justice Committee met behind closed doors after a few hours. Liberal MPs want to end the SNC-Lavalin probe, but opposition MPs, including outspoken Tory MP Pierre Poilievre, are calling for Jody Wilson-Raybould to reappear.
Yeah, and the Liberals are having none of that. They don't want to hear another single witness on the SNC-Lavalin scandal, the one that is all about, do we have two-tier justice in Canada? Folks keep saying, well, it's too difficult for people to understand. No, the polls show Canadians understand. And by a 2-to-1 margin, if not more, depending on which poll you look at, Canadians believe the former Attorney General over Justin Trudeau. And her allegation is that Justin Trudeau and members of his staff put inappropriate pressure on her in her role as the Attorney General to try and get her to basically throw a court proceeding. They wanted her to end the criminal prosecution of a well-connected Montreal firm to help them get off bribery and corruption charges. Canadians get that. They understand. The average person has greater abilities than I think a lot of pundits give them credit. So the Liberals said, no, we've heard enough witnesses. We don't need to hear any more. Doesn't matter that most of the key players in this have not been heard from twice. They say, no, we're done. We are done. And what they want to study is online hate and the rise of right-wing extremism and white supremacy. They are effectively using the shooting at the mosque in Christchurch, New Zealand to cover up. And I find that deplorable. I'm not saying that that's not an appropriate topic for the Justice Committee, of all places, to try and study. But to use that as an excuse to stop an investigation into corruption in your own government is despicable.
Our Prime Minister Justin Trudeau recently named a former Liberal Justice Minister as special advisor on the SNC-Lavalin affair. Brian, it was met by quite a few jeers and laughter during question period.
Yeah, well, Monday they were laughing, Tuesday they were walking out, which was Andrew Scheer's reaction to the budget. He said, this budget's illegitimate. We're walking out because you won't talk about SNC-Lavalin. Well, the way that Justin Trudeau wants to talk about SNC-Lavalin is to have Anne McClellan, who was Justice Minister and Attorney General under Jean Chrétien in the late 90s and the early 2000s, to come in and investigate what the role of the Attorney General and the Justice Minister should be. Should they be split? And to provide a report. And he's saying that she's going to provide an unbiased view. Look, I have great respect for Anne McClellan. She is a woman that has devoted her life to public service. She is a capable woman. She's a very smart woman, but she's also a very partisan liberal. Until they made this announcement, and actually until after they had made the announcement and it was pointed out to the government, she was scheduled to be the headliner at a liberal fundraiser, a very well-heeled liberal fundraiser to try and get more women in politics at the end of this month. So, she's out there stumping for the liberals. She has made comments on this very case in a public manner, and you're going to ask someone that's fundraising for the party to investigate the party? It is laughable, and that's why both the Conservatives and the NDP are mocking it. There's no other reaction to it, but it shouldn't be allowed to stand.
Brian, a story we recently aired on BCN was that Privy Council Clerk Michael Wernick stepped down. Okay, let's add this up now. Jody Wilson-Raybould left, Jane Philpott, Scott Bryson, Gerald Butts, and now Mr. Wernick. Our Prime Minister has done his third cabinet shuffle in just 3 months.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Let's consider this for a moment. Consider the fact that the Justice Committee says there's nothing left to see. Well, the Liberals on the Justice Committee say there's nothing left to see. It was just over a week ago the Prime Minister was saying, or almost 2 weeks ago, the Prime Minister was saying, let the Justice Committee do their work. They're investigating. Let them keep investigating. They say there's nothing left to see. And yet, the former Attorney General and the turned Veterans Affairs Minister resigned from Cabinet. Then Jerry Butts, the Prime Minister's principal advisor, principal secretary, and best buddy since university, resigned. Then Jane Philpott resigned. Then Michael Wernick resigned. But why did any of them resign? Apparently because nobody did anything wrong and there's nothing to see here. You don't get four powerful people resigning from powerful and influential positions over nothing. There is something there. This is not the nothing burger that the Liberals want to see. And Michael Wernick, by the way, part of his reasoning, he's right on this, was he said, part of his role as clerk of the Privy Council was to oversee the next election and look out for foreign interference and matters of that. The Conservatives and the NDP said they didn't trust him to oversee the next election because he came across so partisan in his committee appearances. They also basically said they wouldn't trust him if they formed government, and he acknowledged that that was not possible, so he'll step down before the next election. A guy named Ian Shugart, who's another lifelong bureaucrat, will take over, and hopefully he can just do the job that clerks are called to do and not be a cheerleader for the party in power. And I feel that way about whoever's in power, Hal. The clerk of the Privy Council should not be their cheerleader.
The SNC-Lavalin affair will be on the top of many Canadians' minds as we head to the fall election, but so will the Norman trial. Brian, give our viewers a bit of history on this case and how the Department of National Defence has declined to pay for legal fees for Vice Admiral Mark Norman, but will pay lawyers for those testifying for the Crown.
Yeah, Mark Norman is a man that also dedicated his life to public service, but through the military, rose to be the second in command for the Canadian forces. So there's the chief of the defense staff. He was right below that, top naval officer in the country, accused of leaking cabinet secrets. I just want to point out, over the last week, Hal, basically the entire budget, this document that we were talking about off the top, basically all the major aspects of the budget that the government wanted to highlight were leaked out to the media. So why is Mark Norman on trial in a town where everything gets leaked and where the government orchestrated many of the leaks on this very budget, a very sensitive document? It used to be you didn't find out a thing about the budget. Now they leaked the whole thing, but Mark Norman's on trial. It seems unfair. It also does seem unfair that he has to crowdfund for his legal defense. But as you say, the Navy, the military will pay for those who are going to be Crown witnesses and who may feel they need their own legal counsel as they go in to testify.
Now, we've talked a lot about Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, Tory leader Andrew Scheer, but NDP leader Jagmeet Singh finally made his debut in the House of Commons. Brian, how well did he do?
He's doing better than I think people would have given him credit for a couple of weeks ago. His party, it's interesting to watch both the Conservatives and the NDP working hand in glove in some areas of this fight, push back against the Liberals trying to shut down the investigation of SNC-Lavalin, but he's also carving out his own area. He decided that his MPs would not walk out in solidarity with the Conservatives, which the Conservatives did after yelling down the finance minister's budget speech on Tuesday. So he does have experience. He was a well-regarded member of the Ontario legislature, but I can tell you, as someone that's just moved down to Queen's Park, it's a very different setup at Queen's Park than it is on Parliament Hill. Even the way they ask questions is different. So Singh's going to take a little while to find his sea legs, to go back to the Admiral Norman Navy side of things. But I think he's surprising people in how he's doing, and this is only going to raise his profile and perhaps raise the fortunes of the NDP, which have been sagging without a full-time leader in the House of Commons.
Which will therefore be a benefit to the Conservatives heading into the fall election, split that left vote. Maybe the Tories will go right up the middle.
Absolutely.
Canada announced recently that it's extending military missions in both Ukraine and Iraq, but there will be no change to the size and composition of the 200 soldiers in the Canadian contingent. Let's talk a bit about that.
We have been part of the Ukraine mission since about 2014. And this is something that is, in Iraq about the same length of time. Both of these started under the Harper Conservatives. The idea with Ukraine, it's a training mission. It's basically because they're not a member of NATO, unlike Poland, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, all these countries that also border with Russia, they feel a bit more vulnerable. If Russia were to invade Lithuania, Latvia, Estonia, where we also have troops, then we would be obliged, because they're NATO members, to go in and help defend them. We don't have that same thing with Ukraine, and so what we've been doing there is trying to just do a show of support, to help with training, to show that they're not alone, that they've got support from the West, because after the annex of Crimea, there was a lot of concern that there would be more. And of course, Russia fighting in eastern Ukraine, but not calling themselves Russian soldiers. In Iraq, yes, we're still a small part of the pushback against ISIS. Of course, we got out of the bombing campaign shortly after the 2015 election, but still remain a part of that. And I don't hear any complaints from Canadians that we're part of either mission.
Brian, let's chat a bit about social media here. Facebook is introducing measures to prevent election disruption.
And I'm not sure how much I trust Facebook on these sorts of things, because in the past, they have teamed up with organizations like Snopes.com, which maybe you remember. Snopes is the place you go to verify that email that your great aunt sent you about don't sit down on chairs in movie theaters or you'll get pricked by a needle and then you'll get a horrible disease and die. And Snopes would tell you it's not true. When Snopes became political, they showed that they were consistently on one side, and that was on the side of the left. And so a lot of conservatives just feel like the organization's way too liberal. They've been one of Facebook's fact checkers before. And so a lot of conservatives are wary about Facebook getting involved in what material you can and can't see, what material will be visible to the public, what won't be, because they don't have a great track record. There have been leaks of memos from Facebook itself talking about suppressing conservative content. So I think we have to be wary about this, especially given some of the close ties between the Trudeau government and, Facebook itself, from locals that had gone to work for Facebook after working for the Liberals to Justin Trudeau's relationship with some of the executives at the top of the organization.
BCN contributor Brian Lilley joining me from Ottawa once again. Thanks so much, Brian.
Thank you.